Good morning, Bridget and Rachel. It's that bit where your parents say, come on, let's get around the dining room table, let's get around the kitchen table and talk about this. We need to talk about your actions. We need to talk about your actions. And you need to listen. Now, we've gone past the bit where we can say, do you think you could try this? Do you think you should do this? We now need to look at the barriers that you've created, which are excluding children from a quality education or any education in some parts. And we need to look about how we're going to change this now. Not tomorrow, now. Because you are the biggest barrier to education for children in this country at the minute, the pair of you. You are equally complicit in this. So you need to listen to what the parents and the teachers have to say and the children, and you need to have a conversation with each other about how you're going to put this right. So, Rachel, you've imposed financial constraints on schools that they can't meet, and that's schools in the private sector and in the state sector. So, none of them can meet them. So, the schools in the private sector can't meet VAT, national insurance and employer contribution, and the schools in the state sector can't meet the national insurance and employer contribution. Now, you've said you've budgeted to help them out with that, but they're saying you haven't. They're saying they're tens of thousands of pounds short. So because they're tens of thousands of pounds short, what are they doing? Well, they're cutting money left, right and centre. They're cutting budgets. They're taking away from one area and trying to put it into another. You've announced a 2.8% pay rise, but you haven't told anyone where they're going to get that money from other than existing budgets. And we know that the unions want 3.8%. So obviously Bridget's had 33 meetings with the unions. One assumes that you're just going to bow to them and go, okay, here's your 3.8%. Where's it going to come from? Now, at the beginning of this, I got a huge amount of flack from people saying, just pay your taxes and shut up. Why won't you help support state education? And as I always said, I will. I will support state education. I do support state education. I am state educated. I love the amount of people that go, well, you're privately educated. No, I'm not. State comprehensive. And I loved most of it. But my point is, I've always argued that this will affect state as much as it will affect private, and it is. So the government's own figures were that 56,000 children would move from private education in the first 2 years. Rachel Reeves was told this. She knew that with that number of students leaving, they would go into the state sector and that would be net zero. She knew that. She was told that. She knew VAT would make no money. She was also told the most destructive time to implement VAT on education would be January 2025. It would be the most destructive time for students, but it would be the most destructive time for state schools because they weren't ready for the influx. So she was told both sectors would be harmed, and she went ahead with it anyway, knowing it would make no money and knowing it would be destructive. Then we've got Bridget Phillipson, on the other hand, who was told that this would negatively affect kids in state. And she said, no, it won't. We can support them. We have everything in place. She said she did not accept the numbers of children leaving. Yet how could she not accept it? Because she'd been told it by her very own departments that it was going to be more than the independent sector was saying. So you and I, average mum and dad, were told it would be 35,000 over 3 years, where the real figures, well, I think it was 54, not 56, 54,000 over 2 years, and that meant it would make no money. So Phillipson and Reeves, you both knew this, but you still went ahead. Bridget Phillipson, you spewed hate towards the private sector. To be fair, as did you, Rachel, and we all know that Angela Rayner called Eton students scum. So we know that you hate the private sector. So we know that your driving force in this was to bring them down. Had you factored in the effect this would have on state school, I doubt you'd have done it. Because if state is the prize that you are trying to protect, why would you implement something that will bring it down? So the figures to back this up, we're looking at the cuts. In 2024, 38% of secondary schools were cutting teachers. In 2025, it's 51%. Cutting teaching assistants in 2024, 41%. In 2025, 50%. Cutting or GCSE subject reduction in 2024 was 29%. In 2025, it's 33%. A levels, 23% in 2024, 29% in 2025. you can see where the figures are going. All of the cuts that were being made under the Tories were less, significantly less, than the cuts that are now being made under Labour. And this, Bridget, is on your watch. You can't blame them anymore. This is down to you now. This is entirely down to you and Rachel and the price hikes that you have put on schools that make it unaffordable. And we know this because the teachers are saying so, both in state and in private sectors, due to the rising costs out of school control. Now, Edinburgh Academy has suspended all scholarships and bursaries for low-income families because they can't afford them anymore. So the kids that need them the most, the kids that would never have normally been able to be afforded a private education, got it through a nursery and a bursary and a scholarship, that's now gone. So they're out the market. We've then got Lorraine Davidson, Chief Executive of the Scottish Council of Independent Schools, saying, we told the UK government that bursary pupils would be the most impacted by the flawed education tax and called for them to be exempt, but they refused to listen. So we know that the government was told repeatedly that this would negatively impact those that needed it the most, and they refused to listen. And I think that sort of tells us all we need to know about who we're dealing with this, because it's not like you didn't have the facts, Bridget and Rachel. It's not like you didn't know that this was going to really detrimentally hurt children. You did know, but you went ahead regardless. So, Bridget, when you said that you didn't accept that private schools would close, you lied because you knew an extra 100 would close as a direct response to VAT, national insurance and employment contributions. But you lied. You said, I don't accept that. Or you said, well, 70 odd schools close every year. We see it all the time. You knew that this was in addition to. And we know that you knew because these figures came out in court. They're your own figures. So you lied. Rachel Reeves lied. Keir Starmer lied. You all said state could cope and the impact on private wouldn't be that big. But you knew that it would. So we look, there's 24 primary schools and secondary schools overcrowded in Oxfordshire. How is that high and rising standards when there are classes made up of over 35? How is that high and rising standards? How is that job satisfaction for a teacher who is so swamped? And because, as we've just seen, we're losing teaching assistants at a rate of knots, they're on their own. How is that even safe? I mean, we're losing police from schools in London. So how is that safe? We've got overcrowded schools, overcrowded classrooms as a direct response to the financial impositions that Rachel Reeves is putting on schools across both sectors and Bridget Phillipson is endorsing. And then we look at the government set to make this. Oh, so this was from Pepe, and I'm really sorry, I'm rubbish with pronunciations of names. Pepe Diasio, I think. I'm sorry, Pepe, the General Secretary of the Association of Schools and College Leaders, who has said the government is set to make the situation even worse by its proposal to implement teachers' pay awards for 2025-2026 without funding necessary to enable schools to afford these costs. So we know that we can't retain the teachers that we've got. And now we're asking schools to give teachers a pay increase from their own budgets, their existing budgets, which will directly impact the most needy children. I feel we've reached a crossroads here, and the VR headset is lying to you, Bridget and Rachel. The picture that you're seeing is distorted. It's not true. The children, the stats, the teachers, the parents, the governors, the teaching assistants, the cooks, the cleaners, the ground staff, the caretakers, the school bus drivers, they're all telling you this isn't working across the board. It doesn't matter how many staged videos you do of your proposals, your policies, that you feel as if you bang that out enough, people will believe it. The truth is in what's happening right now to children. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. It's in the eating. Never has it been truer. So Take the VR headset off. Listen to those who are trying to give you quality advice. And remember a child in the forefront of your mind when you are making these decisions. Because if you can't do that, we have even bigger problems. If you are so emotionally disconnected to the effect that your policies are having on human beings, we have got serious, serious problems.